Happy Black History Month. This is Hush coming at you with another segment of Homage to Our Mothers, Reclamation of Our Sensuality, highly inspired by the book Pussy Prayers. And today we pay homage to the victims of compulsory sterilization, aka forced sterilization. To get a full understanding, we first have to take a look at the birth of eugenics, which is a study of how to increase the occurrence of heritable desirable traits such as blonde hair, blue eyes, or to weed out any possible genetic defects. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, this idea became very, very popular, and it was heavily embraced by scientists, social activists, politicians. Some of the most notable names were Theodore Roosevelt, Andrew Carnegie, even Margaret Sanger, and of course, most notoriously, Adolf Hitler. Clearly, this science was junk science, heavily rooted in racial bias. To say, the upper white class society begins to panic about population control, especially in non-black areas. And so by the early 1900s, you see that the U.S. government is allowing public policies in individual states to give them the right to sterilize anyone who is deemed unwilling or unwitting. Now, this would definitely leave black women in the biggest lurch of all, especially since they are allowed to now have these procedures without the consent of black women. Eerily, a lot of black women were being sterilized after giving birth to their children, often being told by their doctor that they are suffering from a condition that would only be fixed by surgery. Most common types of procedures would include hysterectomies, which is the complete removal of the uterus, or other methods include tubal ligation, which was the tying, cutting, or burning of the fallopian tubes. By the 1930s, a huge number of states allowed the sterilizations to take place on anyone they deemed unwanted by society, particularly in the southern states of Mississippi, Alabama, and North Carolina. In fact, one of the foremost frontrunners of the civil rights movement, Fannie Lou Hamer, would also become a victim in 1961 of a non-consensual tubal ligation. Now, other sources do state that she actually underwent a full hysterectomy. Also should be noted that Fannie Lou was the first civil rights activist in the 60s to openly address the racist and violent practice of forced sterilization. Unfortunately, even as Fannie Lou Hamer continued to raise awareness, it would still continue. And one of the largest number of procedures performed on black women between the 1930s well into 1974 was in the state of North Carolina. The largest surge of sterilizations, however, did not happen until the 1950s, when the NCEB began to target black people in order to reduce the cost of welfare, thereby quelling the white anxiety. During its nearly 5-decade run, the NCEB managed to sterilize over 7,600 people, 3,400 of which were black women. The program finally ended in 1974. However, damage had already been irreparably done. The desperate scramble to maintain power and privilege amongst the white community had robbed thousands of black women of their ability to reproduce. One of the most talked about cases, in fact, was that of Elaine Riddick's pictured center. In the late 1960s, Elaine was the victim of a brutal sexual assault. The end result was that of a pregnancy at the age of 14. Shortly after the birth of her child, the NCEB ordered a physician to perform a sterilization on Elaine. The reason? For being feeble-minded and promiscuous. Her assault had not once been considered. However, it would not be until years later, when Elaine's first marriage would end due to her not being able to conceive, that she would learn the horrifying truth. In 2011, she would go on to sue the state of North Carolina, but was only awarded a mere $50,000. Since then, she has continued to become an advocate for black women's reproductive rights, currently serving as the executive director of the Rebecca Project for Justice. It is absolutely important to note that forced sterilization is not commonly practiced in this country. However, it still very much exists. Considering the largest number of maternal mortalities in the United States is with black women, it goes without saying that racial bias is still prevalent with the largest number of birth control pills, shots, and other contraceptives still being pushed amongst Black women. It is without a doubt that Black women are still the target of reproductive injustice. And while we are bringing more awareness to it, we still do have a long way to go. While today's segment was extremely heartbreaking, it is important that we do remember these things so that they do not have a chance to reemerge in the future. And with this segment, we would like to honor all of the victims of the forced sterilization movement. We honor you, we love you, we will remember you, because you are our mothers.